Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 38 of the Real-Time Visual Effects Podcast. Today our interview is with guest Urban Bradeško, who is an FX artist, mentor, and creative director at Rebelway. He has worked on titles like Magic the Gathering, Gears of War 5, Days Gone, as well as film work with projects like the Netflix show Love, Death, and Robots. Urban brings a wealth of experience navigating the VFX world as a teacher, leader, and continuing student of the art. With that said, let's dive in.
Welcome to the Real-Time Visual Effects Podcast, the place to hear from some of the video game industry's most seasoned artists and up your game. Listen in on how you can learn and grow as a VFX artist, discover your own wizard, and network with hundreds of other talented magicians in the real-time visual effects community. Here is your host, Travis McCallum.
Hey Urban, thanks for coming on the show today. How you doing today, man?
Dude, yeah, love to be here. Very honored to be here. Today, I'm doing okay. Like I was telling you earlier, for some reason, I have some back pain. And it's probably from working too much and sitting too much. So I would encourage everybody that people that do FX usually sit too much and we work too hard and too long. So take a walk and take a run, do a run every now and then.
I agree. I actually get my run first thing in the morning. I find that it gives me that adrenaline boost, dopamine hit, whatever, energy I need to go and get my day started. And from there, my mind is so much clearer after I get that morning sleepy fog out of my head.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. Everybody's different.
Yeah. No, dude, I think I hate running in the morning, but what I do is I wake up, I do 50 push-ups and 20 squats, and then I do a cold shower. And that usually freaking pumps me up for the next 3 hours. Then I need to take a break and I do a quick workout, and then I do lunch, and then I continue working. So yeah, exercise.
The cold shower really gets to you, gets the blood pumping for sure.
I hated it. It was so difficult to get adjusted to it. I think the best way of doing it is literally just go to the shower. I do it with some warm water first, and then I freaking slam it to the coldest there is. If you try to half-ass it and you go slowly towards the cold, your body's going to be freaking out and your brain doesn't like it. You just have to go for it. Just commit 100%.
Urban, I know that you've been doing a lot for the real-time visual effects community as a mentor, as an artist actually doing your own work, and as a creative director working at Rebelway, helping other artists teach others. It's really awesome to see all these awesome projects you work on. But I want to start with your origin story. Can you take us back in the Wayback Machine and tell us, how did you get started in visual effects?
So what I did was, while I was attending high school, and I went to a multimedia high school kind of thing. And you had 2 directions that you can pick for your last year. And one of them was 3D and animation, and the other one was directing. And I chose directing because I actually wanted to be a filmmaker, like directing big films. I loved Spielberg. I loved Tarantino, people like that. That was my dream. While I was in high school, I actually opened up a production company of sorts where we were filming like music videos and small commercials and whatnot. And after I finished high school, I went and worked there like full time. And I was lucky enough that my dad, he actually, at the same time, he kind of opened up a local TV station. We could merge together. So we were doing the local TV stuff. At the same time, I was doing my production kind of filmmaking things. We had a studio. We had, I think towards the end, because I don't work there anymore and the TV station still runs, but kind of the production version that I developed there doesn't work anymore. But we had around 10 to 15 people employed, and we had a lot of gear. We were doing documentaries and like music videos for kind of the famous people here in Slovenia. While I was doing all of that, I was very curious in terms of visual effects, but I started doing it as a hobby, just because I really thought it was very cool. Because looking at behind the scenes from movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, other big movies like Transformers or whatever, like looking the behind the scenes, I always liked the visual effects aspect of it the most. So I very slowly transitioned from being kind of a director of photography on film shoots to learning Houdini. But it was way too difficult because going from filmmaking to Houdini, it was a huge jump. Essentially in filmmaking, you have your camera. Sure, you have to be a bit technical in some aspects, but with Houdini, technical is a completely different thing. You have to know math, you have to know trigonometry, quaternions, just calculating vectors and velocities and normals. I was overwhelmed, so I kind of stopped and I started learning Cinema 4D. Cinema was way easier because you have a lot of presets and stuff like that. But Cinema had a lot of limitations. So I was jumping from Cinema to Houdini, but I was giving up on Houdini every time. I was like, no, Houdini is too hard. I went back to Cinema. But then I saw that Cinema had too many limitations again. I went back to Houdini. And then slowly after a couple of years, I became comfortable with doing FX in Houdini. And I created my first showreel. I started sending it around and I got my kind of first position in FX. That was not real-time related. That was just doing Houdini stuff. In terms of real-time, I learned on the job. We had a VR game that we were doing inside the studio. It was like a full-on in-studio job. And the whole studio was kind of learning the real-time aspect of the industry. So we had the opportunity to learn real-time. So that's how we started. And then later on, we got to work on Gears of War 5 and we kind of did the whole game. Not the whole game, but we worked during almost the full game production on that game. So that's when I actually learned most of the things and worked with amazing real-time artists. Yeah, that was my trajectory. So filmmaking, pre-rendered effects to real-time effects. And now I do both. I do real-time and pre-rendered effects.
Rock on, man. It's super awesome to hear how that trajectory works. I'm curious, even where you are now in visual effects, are you still maybe as a side hustle or as a passion or interest, still interested in directing? Is that a core area of your identity that you really enjoy pursuing? Maybe not for money.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, because I just like it as a hobby. I love photography. I love editing photos and filmmaking. I think it's super fun. It's just, I like doing it. It's everything that is related to creating something. I like doing it. A couple of years ago, I actually entered in a competition at BlizzCon. I'm not sure if you know BlizzCon.
BlizzCon.
Yeah, it's like a big ass convention for all Blizzard games, and they have a video competition there. And this was going to be my first BlizzCon that I'm going to attend. And funny enough, on that BlizzCon, there was a cinematic that premiered for Heroes of the Storm that I was the layout supervisor for. That was really cool seeing it premiere at BlizzCon. That was a big moment. They had a video competition. Each year they have one. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'm going to just do a video for fun. And then I ended up winning the competition, which was even more freaking amazing because my girlfriend, she was doing the cosplay competition that same year, and she got selected in the top 25 for the main cosplay competition. So I was actually behind the stage when my video was rolling, waiting with her because she was going on stage right after my video. It was such a weird moment. Like everything was just happening in the same day. It was so weird. I mean, it was awesome, freaking awesome. But yeah.
That does sound awesome. That's so cool, man.
Yeah. But yeah, to answer your question, I do like doing cinematography, filmmaking as a side hustle. Like I literally just over this weekend, my sister, she had to do a short film for school and I was helping her with shooting, like just a bit of shooting. I didn't do the whole thing. Like I let her do all the mistakes. Otherwise it would be too perfect. But yeah, I helped her with the shooting, with the editing and doing some simple effects. So inspiring her to be a filmmaker as well.
So let's talk about FX and projects. Tell me about your favorite project that you've been able to work on and why you felt like that was a showcase of your favorite or best effects that you've done.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I like the stuff that I did recently with Rebelway, with the cinematics for Rebelway. So Rebelway is the school that I'm the vice president at, and we did this new workshop for explosions. And I think we really did a good job with those explosions. Like I was quite happy with how they turned out. But in terms of like the AAA game projects, I was super happy when I got to work on Destiny 2 for the cinematic. We worked on the cinematics for Destiny 2. I never thought that I'm going to work on a game like that. And when I got into the studio, and then literally I think it was the second project was Destiny 2. I was like, this is it. I made it. This is the best thing ever. I liked the effects that I did there. It was just a bunch of robot destruction. And like when they exploded, there was kind of fluid coming from, well, actually at the back, there was destruction. So they got split in half, and there was fluid splattering all over the place. And I had to do like 20 versions of destruction because somebody was running around and just shooting all of them. It was a lot of work, to be honest. And the deadline was a bit short, but that was fun. But I'm not sure like what was the best effect. Like every project has its highlights, I guess. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. They're all like your babies. You can't really, forsake any of them.
Yeah. It's very difficult. I really like some of the effects I did for the Deathloop cinematic. It's not out yet. The game is not out yet, but I had to do some.
What studio made Deathloop?
Arcane
Studios, right?
Yeah, I saw it in
magic. A Game Informer magazine recently. They did it as a cover story.
Yeah, it's not out yet, right? It's still
still in preview.
Yeah, that was cool because when you work on a cinematic like that, you see kind of the behind the scene footage of the gameplay and what's the game, what it's going to look like. Mm-hmm. It's very cool seeing behind the scenes of all the stuff that, as a kid, you were always wondering how it looks like and how the games are done and made. And it's very cool actually seeing it. Honestly, I really liked working on Gears of War 5 because it was such a big project that we worked on. And those were real-time effects, even though we were doing the cinematics, like most of the cinematic portion, but everything was running in real time, which was a pain in the ass because all the effects had to run in real time, 30 frames per second. And usually cinematics are a bit heightened up. Like, for cinematics, usually the effects, you look a bit better or the characters look a bit better because usually they pre-render them. But because this was like a flagship Microsoft game, almost like a test bench for Unreal Engine as well, they were like, yep, let's do everything in real time, even the cinematics. And that was a pain because you have to optimize everything. Back then, there was Xbox One and then the other Xbox, the less powerful one. And then you have to test on both. It's just, I hate testing stuff like that. I'm more artistic. What I do is I do the effect, I make it as good as possible, and then somebody else is going to fix it.
Yeah, your tech artist usually will go in there.
Yeah.
Where can we reduce the shader counts and
shader complexity? Everything was red all the time. And I was like, yeah, somebody else is going to fix it. Well, the thing is, the way we worked, we were all artists, but also we were all technical artists, especially because we were coming from Houdini. We were doing a lot of setups and custom tools in Houdini and then transferring them to Unreal, but also doing stuff just in Unreal. Yeah, we did a ton of explosions and there's a locust thing flying all over the game. And there was a custom setup for that. That was very technical. That was a fun project because it was a very long project. So you get to work on it almost from start to finish and you can see the development and everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. Being a long project, what are you saying? Like you worked on it for over a year or longer?
Yeah, it was like a year and a half almost. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Is that similar to one of your film projects that you may have worked on as far as the time frame, or do you find the turnaround time for film is much faster than games?
Well, it depends. When I was working at Access Studios, we mostly did like game cinematics, but we also did some stuff for Netflix and plus games. So at Access, you kind of went through all the different mediums. For game cinematics, the turnarounds are usually a lot faster than games. If you work on a game, sometimes games are in development for freaking 6 years or something like that, especially now, like the AAA. Just think of Red Dead Redemption or GTA 6. It's probably, I think Red Dead was in development for 6 to 7 years, or Cyberpunk, same thing, like 6 to 7 years. Game cinematics, usually freaking 4 to 5 months has to be done from start to finish. Maybe you get like a cinematic that's 8 months. That almost never happens. So yeah, the turnaround times are much faster on game cinematics. When we were doing the Love, Dead and Robots, that was also a fast turnaround. So games usually have more time and bigger budgets, I think.
Now that you've been in the industry for a while now. What, at least 10 years, right?
Well, I've been in the VFX industry for like 5 years, but I've been doing all of this like filmmaking and tinkering around with VFX and doing like motion graphics in After Effects and whatnot. I've been doing that for at least 10 to 11 years now. Yeah.
Keeping your finger on the pulse of the industry, what are some of the big trends you're seeing, especially in 2021?
With real time specifically, or like with effects in general?
I would say effects in general, because the bridge between real time and quote traditional or pre-rendered are starting to blend as the two become more integrated with each other. You see, even in filmmaking with things like The Mandalorian, they're using Unreal Engine. But I'm curious what your take is from your observations.
Well, that's kind of the trend, the blend between real time and pre-rendered or filmmaking. That's kind of the trend that's happening now, because real time technology has gotten so good in terms of rendering. I think it's almost going to replace pre-rendered stuff in the next, I don't want to give a timeline, but I think like 2 to 3 years. I think it's going to replace almost at least a portion of the pre-rendered workflow. The problem is with effects, because in real time, there's still no real-time volumetrics effects that could look as good, and you can play them in real time. Sure, you have Ambergen, which is like a real-time simulation software for explosions and smoke, but that still doesn't run in real time when you put it in Unreal Engine. It's still not going to be volumetric. You still have to export it and just do sprites and you know go through the traditional workflow. I think that's the only thing that's kind of holding real time back is the effects portion. So when there's actually going to be a workflow where you have real time volumes and real time explosions that are actually 3D instead of just a 2D sprite, I think that's when a lot of workflows are actually going to move to real time, even like for pre-rendered cinematics. But for now, I think you still cannot match the quality that you get with pre-rendered cinematics and the way you do volume rendering and the way you do hard surface rendering. There's still a distinctive shift in quality when you actually spend 6 months on a pre-rendered cinematic versus doing it in real time. But yeah, that's kind of the trend, right? Like the blend between real time and pre-rendered. I think that's with all the ray tracing and stuff going on.
A bit of a philosophical question. We as FX artists exist, but what do you feel like our purpose is for being here in game companies, in the industry? What is our biggest contribution as FX artists that we can do in our profession today? In other words, like, why do game studios need us? What is our role? I mean, couldn't they just get like an environmental artist to do our job or something?
That's a good question. I think you have to be a specific type of a person to do effects, because otherwise you would be doing environment. And there's a specific type of a person that does environments. I like effects. And I think most people that do effects, we like to bring things in motion and to life. Because if you just do an environment without some clouds or maybe the trees moving or stuff like that, it doesn't look real. It doesn't have motion. It doesn't have life. Just like an animator brings life to a character, we bring life to the whole scene, and we kind of give it that, sense of actual that something is alive, that something is living there, and that it's moving. So I think that's what we do. Plus, it's really fun. We do explosions, we destroy stuff, we do crazy setups, we do magic. Like, it's the best thing. It's literally the best thing.
Sure, man.
Yeah.
I was wondering, as far as like things that you wish you had known when starting out, if you could talk to yourself 5 years ago, what advice would you give yourself? Don't
work too hard, but work smart. I think that's the thing, at least for me personally. When I start doing something, I go at it 100% and I overwork myself. I do that with everything. That's kind of my problem. The problem that I have is I like too many things. That's why I do filmmaking, I do photography, I do effects. I like the business side of things, like helping to run Rebelway and being integrated in a business like that. I like doing all of that, and I kind of go 100% at each thing, which sounds good. And it is, you kind of have to be like that, but I tend to overwork myself. My advice would be don't overwork yourself or don't stress out about it too much. Because that's why I overwork myself, because I'm stressing myself out and I want to do the best job that I can. That's why I overwork. And then you get burned out. That's a bad thing. When you burn out, it's hard to recover from that.
So let's talk about burnout. Obviously, that's something that happens all the time in the industry. Sometimes it's voluntary, sometimes it's involuntary because, studio pressures or client pressures kind of like force you to work way harder than you want, especially with revisions. We know how revisions are. How do you cope with burnout, and what's some advice you have to people that are struggling with being overworked?
Yeah, because that's essentially what happened to me. Every project that I had felt amazing. And then we finished the project, and then the next one came, and then the next one came, and every new project was amazing. And I really wanted to work on all of those projects. The thing is, you just have to you need the discipline to give yourself time and do not work on that project. And that's okay. You don't have to be on every project. You don't have to be doing all the things. I always had a feeling that I'm missing out, not being a good team member or something like in that regard. And that's not true. Like, you need to give yourself time and permission to not do anything. That's something I'm still terrible at because just yesterday, like my girlfriend was saying, because yesterday during the weekend, I tried to take time off and not do anything. But the way I do time off is I'm thinking, how can I not do anything, but still be kind of productive at doing something, which means that you don't 100% take time off. So then I start editing photos, but then it takes me the whole day of editing photos, and I get tired again, even though it's a hobby and I do it for fun. I think you need to learn how to turn it off and just go camping, go take a hike over the weekend or something like that to recharge the batteries.
For sure. I have been trying to make Sundays no computer Sundays. And that's been a big struggle because like you get so attached to your electronics, you have a hard time, disconnecting and going off the grid because we're so interconnected with, technology. That's always a question that goes through many people's minds is discipline. How do I summon the willpower to not do something, whether it's, a bad habit such as drinking too much coffee or consuming alcohol or whatever it is. There's certain things that we aspire to not do. And maybe a great example a lot of artists are struggling with right now is how do I create a habit or a schedule of making sure I work on my visual effects art every single day, maybe from like 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. How do I stick to that schedule? Because I need to stay motivated to do my work, but there are some days I just don't want to work. Do you have any advice to people who are struggling to stay motivated doing art because maybe whatever excuse comes to mind?
I don't think you should do it the whole day. Just take a portion of the day. Maybe do it you have to do it in bite-sized pieces. Especially if you're struggling with something, just do it for 15 minutes per day first and do the task. It's like in a video game. You do a mission. You have a big mission and then you have smaller submissions that lead you to the big mission. You have to do the smaller submissions first. And once you do that, you're going to get momentum, which is the most important thing, getting momentum. And when you do a small task, you will feel the sense of accomplishment because you finished the task. And then maybe you're going to work for another 15 minutes and then another 15 minutes. And then you'll see how long you can work and how far that's going to get you. And that's it. You just need momentum. Sometimes you need to force it just a bit, especially for that first task. You need to force it, but usually forcing it is not good. If you feel like you're forcing it too much, then something is wrong. Either maybe don't work in effects, maybe switch to something else. Kind of has to be natural to a certain degree, but definitely it goes back to when I was saying don't overwork. I used to think that working 12 hours per day is kick-ass, and then you have to do it. It's just part of the hustle. But I disagree. I think if you can focus for 3 hours per day, you can do everything you need. Focus, and don't even do 3 hours in one block. Do 1 hour. Take a break. Do 1 hour. Take a break. Do 1 hour. That's it. Finish your day. You can do whatever you want after that. And you will, after a couple of weeks, if you get in a routine of doing that, that's pretty much it. Because that was the thing that I was doing. And I wonder how you do it as well. I used to overwork and just do it like 10 or 12 hours every day, every weekend, just nonstop.
I agree. And focus is something that many people struggle with. Advice, obviously, is to put your phone away. Like, don't have it in front of you with notifications going off every 5 seconds. Yeah. Which brings me to my next question. What does a day in the life of Urban look like from sunrise to sunset on any given workday? Walk us through that journey and how you stay focused on getting things done.
Yeah, I'm actually very passionate about optimizing my life to the best of my ability. That goes optimizing the way I eat, optimizing the way I sleep, optimizing the way I work. Like I try to optimize everything. And that's probably my logical Houdini thinking brain, because you have to optimize stuff in Houdini so you can render faster, so you can sim faster, so you can just do faster things. I take all of that and just transfer it to real life. Or like in a game, when you're playing an MMO, you kind of need to grind a bit in any game, but you need to optimize your workflow. So you get the most intelligence, so you get the most dexterity, you get the most life, you get the most everything. So real life is very similar to a game, like the way I see it. But okay, so to answer your question, what I do is right now I wake up at 8. We used to wake up at 6 a.m. Like 6 a.m. was the best when we were doing that. And when I say we, I mean me and my girlfriend. Right now we wake up at 8. I have
a question on that because you have a significant other. You say we. Is it easier to just wake up when your partner wakes up? Or do you think, because y'all probably sleep in the same bed or whatnot. So she gets up, she turns on the lights, she's starting her day. So now you got to get up because it's kind of hard to like fall back to sleep with like her going on in the background. Is it just makes sense kind of like living together with somebody to wake up whenever they wake up and kind of to go to bed whenever they go to bed? I know this is more relationship oriented question, but it's something that's always going through my mind because likewise, my girlfriend gets up at 5 a.m. every day.
Jesus.
And it's like,
but that's good. I would love that.
But she's nice. She's nice because she'll put all of her like clothing changes in the bathroom. So she'll get up, she'll go do everything in the bathroom. So she'll close the door, turn off the light for me. But I typically pull out my phone. Bad habit. Don't use your phone when you first wake up, guys.
Don't. Please don't.
And I start checking, the forums and my email and stuff like that. I was curious if you had any thoughts on whether it matters if you wake up at the same time as your partner or if it's or not.
I don't think it matters that much, but I think it's better if you just wake up at the same time. But see that it depends, like, because some people are morning people and then you have not so morning people, but that's based on what's the clock thing for sleeping? I forgot what it's called.
I want to say circadian rhythm or something.
Circadian. Yeah. Circadian rhythm. Yeah. So you kind of have to identify your chronotype, your sleep chronotype, and it's actually a real thing. And there's a whole book about sleep on it that I would recommend. It's called Why We Sleep. I forgot the name of the author. Some people are not good in the mornings, so you should not wake up in the morning. I'm kind of good in the morning and I function, my brain is powered for the first 2 hours in the day. And then my attention span goes down, like way down. So I need to do all the important work in the morning. And me and my girlfriend, we wake up at the same time. Like I said, we used to wake up at 6, which was very good. And I liked that kind of rhythm that we had. But now we do 8. And then the first thing I do is exercise. Like I do a quick 50 push-ups and a couple of squats. And then I take the cold shower. And I don't eat breakfast until at least 12. So I do intermittent fasting almost every day because that gives me like 2 to 3 hours of focused work. And I do most of my work to 12. Well, I'm finished with most of my work at noon, like the important stuff. Then I do a workout again and another shower, like another cold shower. And then we have lunch. And then I do another 3 to 4 hours of work. And then we usually end working at 7 p.m., which is, again, I would recommend stop working at 5, but I stop at 7 or 8 because I have late meetings because the time differences. Usually I have meetings at 7, 8 or 9. But yeah, that's usually my day. And then I just try to repeat that as often as I can and kind of stick to the timings.
Do you find time for fun, for your hobbies within all that?
Well, yeah,
or is that on your off days? How does that work?
Well, I have a fun thing. It's called Fun and Games, and it's scheduled from 7 to 10 p.m. So that's when me and my girlfriend, we play games or we go watch a movie or do something in that nature. But the thing is, I kind of enjoy what I'm doing during the day. So it's not like I need to separate fun from work. It's always in that area of I enjoy doing all of this. But yeah, I do have a schedule for fun and stuff. Cool. There's a cool book called The One Thing. And essentially what the book is about is, yes, just schedule your time in blocks and do 2 blocks or 3 blocks per day where you just do that one thing that you have to do. That is essentially focus. There was actually I think it was a TED talk. They were discussing how everybody tells you, oh, you have to focus, just focus more. But nobody tells you how to focus and nobody teaches you how to focus. They're just telling you that you need to focus more, but nobody knows what that is. Essentially, focusing, is doing that one thing that you have to do, that one important thing. And don't do anything else but just that thing. If you're not able to do that thing, just don't do anything else. Just sit in your chair. Don't check email. Don't check your phone. Don't do anything else. Sit in your chair and just do nothing. That's it. Or do the thing that you have to do, or don't do anything. That's it. That's focus. And
it's so simple, but it's so true. Yeah.
It's the simplest thing. Yeah. Yeah. The one thing. It's a good book. Yeah. I would recommend it. But what's your routine?
My routine?
Yeah.
This is a problem that I have. I have been struggling to develop a routine because I typically act on emotions. If I have something that my intelligent brain says to do, but my heart says otherwise, then I'm just going to follow my heart. Real talk, I'm actually seeing a therapist to develop good habits.
That's good. That's good.
And to build in micro reinforcers to do things. And obviously, one thing that I struggle with, and many other visual effects artists, especially in the game space, struggle with, is excessive video games, game time. I'm trying to cut back on games. For instance, I'm recording this as of May 3rd, and I have other podcast episodes that I've recorded in the past, and they still haven't been edited and uploaded. That's a bad on Travis for not staying disciplined and following through. The important thing there is that a lot of times in our own lives, we have goals that we set forward for ourselves. And the only person that's holding us accountable to achieve those goals are ourselves. We don't have an employer with a whip that's snapping it and be like, you got to get it done by this deadline. So these personal goals that we set, whether it be getting an effect done or building out our reel, they're all limiting beliefs that we put on ourselves, and we have to hold ourselves accountable with our own deadlines. For many of us, that is a struggle. It is a good idea when you're struggling with those things to get outside help. So don't feel ashamed for it, and I don't. And admitting it publicly, I think is good, just to let other artists know that even people like Travis go through that.
Dude, I love that you said that, because that's so true. Like, people think that they should be strong and just work through it or something. And it's not true. Like, you should seek a professional. I don't know. I've never seen a therapist, but I definitely encourage anybody to go and see it if they need, help with stuff like this. 100%. Because why not? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to lie to yourself or neglect yourself. Like with my back pain, I need to see a doctor to tell me if I need to change my mattress or change my chair. It's the same. Your brain is like a muscle as well, and you need to work on it constantly. And maybe sometimes you need to get a trainer, right? If you want to get in shape, you need a trainer. And if you want to get in mental shape, you need a trainer as well. I think that's awesome.
Totally. Urban, your latest role at Rebelway has been ongoing for at least 4 years now. Can you talk to me a little bit about the company, what you do there as a creative director, along with any kind of upcoming courses and any details about really what Rebelway does that's different from other learning platforms in the space?
I think I started working with Saber at least 4 years ago, or maybe 4 years and a half, probably, maybe even 5. I'm not sure anymore. But essentially, I took one of his workshops at CGMA. That's when we kind of became friends. And that was back then when I was still, I was good in Houdini, but I just needed to brush up on my skills. And I took his workshop and we became friends. I think I did a good job in the workshop. And so he noticed my work and he asked me if I want to help out every now and then with some stuff that he was doing. So that's how we kind of created Rebelway. He was working on some of his new workshops and I was helping him. And I started doing all the promos for all the workshops, doing all the editing, doing some of the assets for the workshops and so on. It kind of became quite successful. as a school. After we put out the first 3 to 5 workshops, it became quite successful. People started buying the workshops and we were like, well, this could be a full-time job.
And what time period was this?
I was working in a studio at the same time while helping Saber do the
was
real,
it like early 2000s stuff. Or within like the last decade? I was just curious.
Dude, I don't know when that was. No idea. It was like 4 to 5 years ago, essentially.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, we didn't know it's going to be a full-time job or that we could do this for full-time. It was like, I was always all about learning and then teaching others, because by teaching others, I learn as well. I love that cycle. It just keeps on giving, essentially. So yeah, we created a bunch of workshops. It went well. And then I decided that I actually want to do this full-time. That's when I became kind of the creative director or vice president of Rebelway. Yeah, now we have we have 4 people employed. We have a lot of instructors. We have technical assistants that help all the people because we have a lot of students, and our enrollment is literally closing on Friday. We open up spots for people to enroll 4 times per year. It's just a ton of fun because we do all the stuff we want to do. Essentially, we create the workshop that we think that will look cool, but also a workshop that people will learn the most from. And because we all work in the industry, or we used to work in the industry on real like AAA projects, we know what studios actually require. So we try to orientate the workshops and package them in a way where the student will get the best experience that will kind of mimic the experience in a studio. Yeah, that's what we do.
Can you maybe describe to me one of the past courses that you had and kind of explain some of the learning lessons that students took from the course and they were able to apply toward visual effects? For instance, I did a workshop that I was teaching fully. It was the real-time for cinematics and games. I essentially went through the whole process of showcasing. The first week is literally just the whole week is about the artistic fundamentals of FX. Anything from animation, movement, color, shapes, how to layer effects, everything. But it's all theory, because I think that's the most important thing. Week 3, 4, and 5 were more stylized effects that you would see in, let's say, Diablo or kind of like League of Legends style effects. And then week 6, 7, 8, and 9 were realistic effects. Almost everything that I was doing for Gears of War 5, I kind of crammed into this workshop. And I just showcased how to do like all the explosions, all the smoke stuff, all the loopable simulations, fluid simulations in Houdini, and then how to actually render them, how to sim them, and then how to transfer everything in Unreal Engine, and then how to make it run in Unreal. That's kind of the course, like the workshop overview. And people from all sorts of skill levels can join this workshop and still get something out of it. Even if you're a beginner, you're going to learn something for beginners. If you're an advanced artist, we go into advanced topics as well. So everybody takes something else out of it. If you're a pure beginner, you're going to struggle with this workshop, but that's why we have other workshops that are more intro level workshops for Houdini. And we literally just released a new workshop for stylized effects, for real-time stylized effects. That is, it's the first time we are running it for this session. So that's going to be fun. So I'm curious then, what makes Rebelway and its course curriculum any different, better, or worse than, say, a traditional college education where you would go to like a CGI school, like Full Sail University, for example?
Yeah, well, I don't know for Full Sail. The thing with Rebelway is we have instructors, and the people who created the workshop are actually working in the industry. They're actively working in it, and we are all active in the industry all the time. It's not like we retired and then we're teaching for 10 years already or 15 years. You kind of lose your touch with the industry. You're not up to date. You're not in the flow. All of our techniques that we are trying to teach, like I said, are studio orientated. We don't take unnecessary turns. We know what you need to know to work in a studio, and we prepare everybody. That's for beginners or like junior artists. We get people that are very experienced already, or we get studios that buy in on our workshops. They just buy the learning material for their employees. You know, it's a mixed bag, but it's so funny because I was literally writing an interview about this today for AT level about, it was the same question, like what is the difference between Rebelway and kind of traditional kind of institutions like schools. I gave an example when I was going to school back in high school, because we also had a 3D program, right? As a teenager, you logically think I'm going to a school where they're going to teach me this, right? But that's not true, because the teacher, in most cases, he doesn't know what in a lot of cases, he doesn't know what he's teaching, and they never worked in the industry. They just have to teach you the material that the government gave them, and now they're teaching it to you. Like they're basically there just for a paycheck. They don't know this. That's how they waste your time. They waste a lot of your money. Well, in Slovenia, the schools are quite cheap. So, but in the US, for instance, I know a lot of people who did the whole college experience and they got zero education out of it. They thought, that's the thing, that you think because you're going to school, you're actually going to learn the thing. And then you finish school and you see you don't know anything and nobody's going to employ you because you actually don't know anything. This is like a broad kind of simplification. I was very pissed, to be honest. When I finished high school, I was very pissed because they didn't teach me anything. But I was lucky enough that I was so passionate and I was so eager to learn that I went through all the material on the internet, everything. I watched everything, it was back then when Video Copilot started to become a thing.
Andrew Kramer.
Exactly. Andrew Kramer, he's the guy. He's the guy who got half of this industry into the industry. I'm very grateful for people like that. That's why then I hustled, I did my part, I did the work, and now I feel like I can start giving back to other people, because I felt very lucky to have people like Andrew as a virtual mentor, because the actual teachers in my school failed to do that.
So let's talk about that. I know that you've had a front row seat in seeing similarities between traditional film, VFX, and games in the real-time space. For interested film players looking to make that transition over into the real-time space, what advice do you have to them?
You mean like filmmakers or people who do film effects?
People who do film effects. That, a lot of the struggles we see is it's contract to contract work. And in games specifically, you typically come on as a full-time employee and you have a little bit more job security. So there may be a myriad of reasons why film VFX, which film, as we know, there's a lot of different areas. You could do the actual effects portion, you could do the compositing, whatnot. Now they've seen value in games, or maybe they just love playing video games and they want to explore it. Can you talk to me a little bit about that transition for you and some tips and tricks and things that you think other people may want to know?
Yeah, that's interesting, because last year was actually the year where a lot of people were transitioning to video games. And that was because of the pandemic, because big film studios didn't have any work, because they didn't have any footage to work on. A lot of the people, they kind of transitioned to real time because video game industry was in full on blooming. The pandemic didn't stop the video game industry. So a lot of people actually were coming from films and were trying to transition to real-time VFX. It's not that difficult to transition. If you're working in effects already, if it's for film, if it's for video game cinematics, you kind of already have the skills to transition to real-time. Real-time is just another program that you have to, let's say, if you go to Unity or Unreal Engine, I think it's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass, as it was for me, because you need to optimize everything. And instead of, this is the magic spell that I did, let me just render it. Oh, no, pre-rendered. You just render it as it is through a camera and that's it. But in real time, you need to do a sprite. You need to render it on a 2D sprite sheet and then put it into the engine and then do a whole material around it. It's twice the work. That's what I'm trying to say. It was a bit of a pain for me to transition. So it always depends if that's your goal. If the goal is to work in games, it goes back to passion, I think. If you're passionate about learning real time, you're going to learn it. There isn't really any obstacles. You can go to YouTube. You can take one of our workshops. There's no obstacles anymore. And this goes back to the education kind of back in the day. You only had brick and mortar schools that was it, right? Or you had Andrew Kramer. But now you have so much freaking educational material out there. There's no excuses anymore And if you're passionate about doing it, you will just do it. You don't need tricks or tips or anything. Just do it.
It's true. There are so many different areas of effects that you can explore. Oftentimes, people feel a little overwhelmed trying to figure out what exactly do I want to do as far as the effects. The biggest piece of advice I typically give to people is just discover by exploring and experimenting. Eventually, you'll find something that resonates more with you than other kind of effects. Maybe you like the more traditional 2D flipbook painting, or maybe you like the more procedural, Houdini destruction, fracturing or whatnot. So I know that you're here specifically with an expertise in cinematics, among other things, but let's talk about cinematics for a moment. You've done a lot of them. Tell me about a couple of the game projects and how that workflow or pipeline has worked out for you. And more specifically, tell me about how a person who wants to focus their reel specifically around cinematic work and less on the gameplay specific, what's some advice on putting together their portfolio for cinematics in games?
For real-time cinematics?
Is there a difference? I don't know.
There is a difference. Yeah, this is it's a difficult question, because the way I went into this whole cinematics thing was, let me backtrack. The reason why I got a job in a studio was because my show reel was developed as a cinematic. I didn't do, usually people do, this effect and this effect, and I did this effect and this effect. What I did was one effect. It was just a building, destruction of a building. I showcased just that one effect very well. I thought it was very cool at the time. And I did cameras. I did simple but good lighting. I did simple but good compositing. It was just flowing well. And I know a lot of people are going to tell you that don't put music in your show reel. And that's true, because most people are going to listen to it without audio anyway. But my show reel was developed as a cinematic. That's why I had music that was kind of edited to the beat, but the whole thing was flowing. That's why I got a job, because the head of effects saw that I have other skills than just doing effects. And those skills were, I know how to move the camera, because I used to be a cinematographer. I know how to direct a scene, because as a cinematographer, I also did some directing. And as a filmmaker, I always wanted to direct. I knew some compositing and all of that. And all of those skills come into play when you're doing cinematics. So yeah, those were, I think the tips and tricks would be, don't be just good at effects, but present your effects in a way. Well, but that's kind of the tips for getting into the industry. Yeah, but in terms of tips,
it's true.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true, because when you want to focus on just your effects, typically you have one camera angle and you just let the effect play. But now that you're adding in the cinematics element, yes, you still want to showcase the effect, but now you want to show other areas which may be using the camera and understanding what do those cinematographies look like, rule of thirds, but you're demonstrating that as well. And I always think about, what are the two other disciplines that are touching effects that effects skilled people should be good at. And typically one of them is lighting. If you understand lighting, then it's going to make your effects that much better. So demonstrate how your use of light can help accentuate that cinematic look or whatnot, right? There's recently a YouTube video I was watching specifically, I can't find it off the top of my head, but it was how to make your work in Unreal look cinematic. And they were talking about typically games, when you shoot them, they're 60 frames, 120 frames per second. But when you watch movies, they're 24 frames per second. And there's a reason for that. So when
do you know the reason?
Motion blur, I think. Is that it?
No. It was because, don't quote me on this, but I think 24 was the least amount of frames where you can still normally see motion, but it was also tied to the sound. Well, usually it was 23.976 frames per second. And that's because there was a sync issue with audio. That's why they did a weird frame rate. But 24 is kind of the least amount of frames where you still get motion. So if you have more frames back in the days when they were shooting on film, right? The faster you were filming, the faster you ran out of film. So that was the best kind of price performance frame rate. But everybody got so used to it that now it feels like it's super cinematic.
Yeah.
I don't know who it was. Was it The Hobbit? They did the 48 frames version. It didn't look good. Like usually 24 is cinematic. Yeah. See, funny enough, the recent promo I did for the real-time workshop, I also had it in 24 frames because I thought I was cool. And I also like my promos to feel cinematic. But I ended up doing it in 30 frames because it's something about game effects that looks a bit better when they're 30 frames per second. I don't know what it is. Obviously, if you want a full-on cinematic piece and if you're doing your full move, like if you want a movie quality, then do 24, 100%. But for some reason, like 30 frames for the promo ended up being better. It was just flowing much better than 24.
I asked earlier about your current time as creative director with Rebelway. I also wanted to dive a little bit deeper into management, supervising, whatever you want to call being a leader.
Yeah.
In your experience, what are the good and bad traits you've seen or try to practice or avoid when working with others, specifically in a leadership role?
Dude, that's such a wide question. So when I was working at Access, I was also a layout supervisor and a layout lead, which means that I was doing the cameras. I was kind of doing the previs. I was working with the director in the beginning, and I was leading teams of animators as well. And now with Rebelway, we're always communicating with instructors and students and everything. And it's so important to be a people's person because people need to like you, essentially to follow you. You need to inspire them. Yeah, I think being inspirational to other people will end up having them following you. If you're not inspiring, they will not follow you. You will not be able to lead teams. It's going to be a pain. You're going to have to force it. As soon as you're forcing, people they will not do the tasks that you give them. They will slack off. They will do all sorts of things if you're not inspirational to them because they won't respect you. You need to be inspiring to them and you need their respect. But there's a lot of ways to do that. Like it's so difficult to do this. There's a million books on doing this well. And I think the best way to do it is you just need to be a good person. It's always very simple, these things. Like I read a ton of books on how to be a good director or how to be a good leader or how to do this and that. And in the end of the day, if you don't enjoy being a team player, you won't be able to be a leader. It's very simple. Some people are not meant to be leaders. Some people are better working alone, but some people are better in a team.
Yeah. That's really good advice. And I want to touch base on one of those. Some people are not meant to be leaders. And sometimes people who are really, really good at, creating art or creating effects, that's what they want to do is they want to create effects. They don't want to have to manage other people, and delegate all the stuff that they want to do. So when you're approached to become a manager or a supervisor, but you don't want to, what should you tell your boss?
That's a weird discussion. It's like, hey, you're promoted, you're a supervisor. And you're like, no, I don't want to be. I don't know. It's kind of a natural progression to go from an artist to a lead to a supervisor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some people are just not good at it and they will fail. Maybe even lose their job, maybe lose their passion for the job if they're not enjoying it. Because leadership and management, you have to go through the spreadsheets. Every person has a different way of working. So you need to kind of adjust. You need to know what that person needs.
Mm-hmm.
You need to cater to them.
In my opinion, it comes back to this idea of your upper leadership that's trying to make people become supervisors or groom them to become the future leaders within their departments. Yeah. They should understand the things that their underlings, I can't think of a better word right now, underlings want and value. Because if they understand that this person doesn't want to be a leader, then they'll try and hire somebody outside the company to fill that position instead of trying to push somebody in a direction they don't want to go. That's kind of the answer to that from what I think. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I completely agree. I'm so lucky. I had a very good head of effects at Access. His name is Hudson Martins. Dude, that guy he's so inspiring. That's what I was saying. Those traits in people where you find them inspiring, you would follow them, you would take their advice, you would, even if sometimes they would tell you to do something that you didn't agree with, you would still do it because they usually had a good reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you have a good leader.
Urban, I dig that you've got a creative outlet as an artist in your photography and your own filmmaking projects. Talk to me a little bit about those side hustles and why it's so important not to box your identity under the guise of a single role.
I know you do filmmaking as well, right? And effects.
I do.
Yeah. So why do you do it?
To be honest, I've been thinking about this question a lot, especially over like the past year, especially with the pandemic that happened. And I would almost describe it as filmmaking is my calling, my life calling. And as you have alluded, it's a very broad subject. So I love producing, I love acting, I love directing. I love it all. Is any part of the filmmaking process, it just fills me with joy, whether it's pre-production or post-production. What I aspire for is to have a livelihood to be a visual effects artist. This is how I'm going to pay my bills. This is the necessity, the means to an end. So visual effects, while it's a part of the visual effects process, so the filmmaking process, it's the way I pay my bills. And I enjoy it, but it's not what, necessarily gets my blood pumping every single day. I tend not to tie my identity to being just a visual effects artist, which ironically, Urban, here's the challenge, at least in America, is that employers want specialists. They want people who are really, really good at one thing. That's who they want to hire. Oftentimes, we're forced to choose one thing and to become a specialist in that, to be competitive with the marketplace. That's the reality of the world. I remember recently I had a discussion with a friend in the VFX space, and he's like, can you send me a copy of your resume or a link to your demo reel or your website? And I'm like, yeah, sure, here it is. And he's like, it says you're a filmmaker. I don't want to confuse the employer to think you have ulterior motives joining the company or whatnot. So often there is a challenge between balancing your public identity with who you are in your own mind as an individual versus who you want to present yourself to an employer to get a job in a field. I don't know. It's a big conundrum for me as I face it. And TMI, I know we're talking a lot about me here, but I want to talk more about you, is that I currently am not even working as a visual effects artist. I work in marketing and and sales in a technology company around artificial intelligence, which I'm wearing a third mask, which if at any moment my employer, jumped on my website and saw he's trying to get a job in FX behind our back, then maybe we should fire him because he's no longer an asset to the company. Those are the big ethical questions that come up around this idea of like identity, and at least as far as career is concerned. Let's not even get into the marital affairs of, oh, you're a father, you're a husband or whatnot. That's a whole other beast.
Yeah, it's difficult, eh?
Yeah.
Dude, yeah, I can completely relate to at least some of those points, because for the longest time I was calling myself, I'm a filmmaker and a director of photography and a real-time effects artist and an artist, and I do effects and I also do this and I do photography. For now, like I usually just call myself that I'm an artist. I just like to create stuff with different mediums. I do agree with you when you were saying about specialists. Like I also would recommend people to specialize. Otherwise, you're a jack of all trades, master of none. But it's very difficult for creative people to specialize because, like yourself, like we are interested in so many different areas. So it's difficult, but you are more valuable because you're better. Like if you just do magic effects and you're the best, you will get every job on every movie that needs magic or any game. You're going to be the guy who they're going to call 100%. Like you have people that do 2D effects. There's not a lot of them that are well known. The ones that are, they get jobs immediately in the best companies. It's not difficult for them.
I want to touch base on a story that I heard, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, because this comes back to this question of not putting your identity specifically in one bucket, basically not putting all your eggs in one bucket. And Adam Duff over at Lucid Pixel, he's a great artist who does a lot of science fiction creature art, but he said early in his youth, he had really become a 2D animation kind of like artist. That's what he did. He did 2D art. And then Toy Story came out, and suddenly nobody wanted 2D artists anymore. They were like, you got to have 3D. You got to have 3D stuff. And now he was out of a job because that's all he knew. So his identity as a 2D artist was discarded by society because who wants 2D? So that's kind of the point I'm asking about this idea of like diversifying your talents. And maybe it's a personal point. Give me your thoughts on that.
Dude, yeah. It's so difficult to predict those things, right? It's like the stock market. You can be super diversified in many stocks, but then you have people like Warren Buffett and they say, don't diversify. That's for stupid people. That's not what he said. But he said, he said, don't diversify. Just invest in the companies, in 2 or 1 company that you know it's going to do well, and put all of your eggs just on that company and just bet on it because you know it's going to succeed. If you diversify, it's a risk management thing. If you diversify, you will be risk averse, essentially, right? Because if you do a bit of photography, you do a bit of filmmaking, you do all of that. Yeah, you lose a job, you can still find a job in photography. But if you're the best photographer, you kind of don't need to diversify. You will get paid way, way more than any other person doing the photography as well, just because you're the person that does photography. But then the whole industry shifts, and then all of a sudden you may be out of a job. And that is something that nobody can predict. It's the same with real-time and pre-rendered effects right now. When you said what's kind of where the industry is heading, and I do think everything is heading towards real-time more and more. So let's say people that only do Houdini effects, right, potentially could be out of a job in like 5 to 10 years because everything is going to be running in real time. And if you only know how to do very slow, slower simulations that are, well, right now they look better. But what if real time looks just as good in 5 years? Then all the people that specialize in Pyro might be out of a job because that real time software does it in real time and maybe it looks just as good. Who knows? It's so difficult to say. Honestly, it's like predicting the future to a certain degree. Yeah.
It's great stuff, Urban. Great stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready for the lightning round questions? Quick and easy, just like visual effects.
Yeah. Yeah, do it.
What is a perfect one-day getaway in Glasgow, United Kingdom, and the surrounding area?
Right now, I'm not in Glasgow, but we are going to move back. Currently, we live in Slovenia. And it's funny you ask this question. Glasgow is beautiful. There's so many places you can go, like Isle of Skye or other amazing landscape kind of lakes. Well, they call them lochs there. And the thing is, when we were living there, right before the pandemic, we moved back to Slovenia. But when we were living there, we kind of did a mistake and didn't visit a lot of places there. We will probably move back now, visit all the places. That's the tip. Just visit all the places there. It's beautiful. The weather is a bit shitty every now and then, but it's beautiful.
What video game or app are you using on your phone that is the most fun?
I don't use my phone at all.
All right.
Almost. Yeah, I use it 15 minutes per day, but that's only for checking Discord or LinkedIn for chats, maybe Messenger. I don't use it as a thing. Yeah.
What is your favorite thing to cook or eat?
Salmon.
What is your favorite book or podcast you've listened to recently?
In terms of podcasts, I Love the Future. It's a podcast run by Chris Do. Just amazing stuff. It's about business, about design, about art. Just so good. They even have a business bootcamp workshop. So good. I was recently reading the stuff from Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week or Tools of Titans and stuff like that.
Favorite video game visual effect you're jealous of that is not your own?
God of War, probably. Wait, there was God of War, the latest one. So good. My God. All the effects from League of Legends are so well done. And they're 2D. A lot of them are 2D painted and they have 2D textures. But they're so... I would love to do that, but it would just take me some time to kind of adjust my workflows and my art style to do specifically those kind of effects. I wish I could do that.
Best advice for a first-time visual effects artist or people looking to get into the industry?
Like I was saying before, present your effects well before they get into the industry or when they are already in the industry.
I think people who are looking to get into the industry.
To get it. So yeah, presenting your work in the best possible way because people will notice that. Don't just put your effects on a black background. Don't do bad camera work because sometimes I see effects in the camera just like it does a weird thing. It has to be nice because you're going to be working in a pipeline and you need to understand how everything works. That's why working at Axis was so amazing because we did comp. Sometimes I even did finished composites for some stuff. Every FX artist had to do their own pre-comps before they handed over the effect, just so that whoever was comping it could see how you see your effect being comped in the scene. So you had to know how to composite stuff. You had to know, if you know how to do effects and compositing, you know how color works, you know how shape works, you know how everything works. if you want to get into the industry, it's important that you know the pipeline and you kind of know all the different topics when it comes to camera work, rendering, compositing, and then you present your effects in the best possible way. If you do all of that, people will notice, you will get a job. Very easy.
What are you most excited about for the future of VFX?
I'm kind of excited for all the real-time possibilities, but at the same time, I really like the workflow that we have now, where you need to spend some time to develop the effect. I kind of fear that it's going to become too much just button pressing. I fear that the tools are going to get too easy. I know it's so stupid when I say that, but I almost don't want it to be too easy. I want people to be able to do it. But I feel like I don't want the effects yet to be too simple to do. Like, you press a button, you get the best explosion ever made.
There's a bit of a fear of automation and artificial intelligence kind of taking over a lot of our artistic job, whether it be through like the proceduralism. And I kind of think about Houdini, how it has all these shelf tools that automatically create effects for us. And it's like, you just push a button.
Yeah. I mean, the shelf tools in Houdini are not good. They give you a basic setup that sometimes you need to change it completely if you want a good result. But they're making those better and better each time. And that's good because sometimes I'm like, oh, thank God, I can just press a button. I get a whole workflow already. I don't need to rebuild it. I mean, I have my own workflows in HIP files. So I just open up my workflows and just copy paste them almost as shelf tools. But so at the same time, I'm very enthusiastic about all the real-time possibilities, all the real-time simulations, all the real-time effects that we're going to be able to do. But at the same time, I like to struggle just a bit by making something very cool. I like to put in the work and I don't want it to be too automated where just anybody, I feel like I just sound like an old person when I'm like, oh, back in the day, the simulation took 3 weeks to finish.
Hey, I hear it all the time with rotoscopers. Like, I want to do rotoscoping for the rest of my life. And they're like, no, you're not going to be doing that for much longer. So
who wants to do rotoscoping? It's the worst. it's the most painful job. See, but the same goes, not just for this industry, the same topic kind of applies to any job automation, right? In all the supermarkets, like the cashiers, they're probably going to be replaced. It's just going to be robots and machines. And then 2 security guards. Maybe even the security guards are going to be obsolete. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's going to happen. Like all the automated jobs are going to become obsolete. I mean, effects is not going to become obsolete. You still need to modify it, to tweak it, to give it a special touch. Like it's not going anywhere. The same goes for animation. You need somebody to animate it. You're not going to get an AI to magically animate a character for you. Sure, you can do mocap. Mocap is a form of automation, but even with mocap, you still need to fix it. But then I think if you see some of the trends that are coming, especially in the film industry now, is stylized. In the game industry, everything is going towards a more stylized direction because I feel like we kind of mastered the photoreal, not master, but the photoreal thing is kind of done. Like you have The Last of Us, you have even God of War looks almost photoreal, but the effects are still stylized and the story is still stylized. And I feel like the whole industry is going towards a stylized direction because you need artistic approach to it. If you just want something to be super realistic, I think that is becoming very boring now because you can just you put all the photo scans in the scene, you can make it photoreal much easier than you can make it stylized.
Sure. So, if anything, from the realism side, it may be more geared into the AR, VR space as we try and create these virtual worlds for us to live in. But time will tell. Yeah,
I didn't even touch on VR and AR. Yeah, that's also a big thing that's coming, especially with the NFTs. Like I'm sure you know the whole NFT craze that's happening.
I saw some memes online and about what is the definition of an NFT, and there are really some funny things circulating the internet right now.
It's very interesting, the whole NFTs and crypto and decentralized money. And dude, I don't know. It's also like predicting the future, but I think soon you will have like virtual museums. Well, this already exists. Mm-hmm. You put your goggles on, you go into a virtual museum, you put your gloves on as well. And you have museums of NFT art and you can go there and just give it to a person and he will take it and you essentially buy the NFT from them. And then you own their art and they get some Ethereum in exchange. I think that's going to be a big concept soon because VR is also still developing. More and more games are going to be coming out for VR. Soon everybody will have a VR headset at home. I don't know where all of this is going to go, but it's going.
What question do you never get asked that you wish you were asked more often?
It's that focus question because nobody tells you how to focus.
Urban,
yeah.
How do you focus?
Well, I kind of answered it already before, but I see a lot of these gurus on YouTube that are just telling you all the time you need to hustle, you need to do more work than the other person to succeed and all of that. But nobody tells you the importance of focusing and maybe working less, but working smarter, which I think is way more important. Like I said, if you just focus for 1 or 2 hours per day on one task, you will probably do more than some people do in the whole week. Because I see a lot of people that tell you that they work 10 hours per day. And I'm like, that's impossible. You can do stuff for 10 hours, but you cannot be productive for 10 hours. You can be productive maybe for 2 hours or 3 hours, and then you're done. Your freaking bar gets exhausted, and that's it. That's focusing. Do it.
Any final thoughts or things you want to plug? Any people, companies, projects that you would like to do a shout out to?
Well, yeah, like I said, we just did the stylized real-time effects workshop. It was me and Shores, Delat, and Lush. We were the 3 artists that created it. Gonna go live on May the 7th. So in a couple of days, you can already enroll if you want to, and it's for anybody who wants to get into, for beginners to medium kind of skill level artists who wants to work in kind of League of Legends, Overwatch, Hades kind of games. So stylized real-time effects, essentially. And we go through the whole thing. Literally, it's so packed, this workshop. It took us like 4 or 5 months to finish. 3 people were working on it. So it's really, really, we put a lot of work on it. So that's on rebelway.net. Obviously, the listeners of this podcast are into real-time effects. So if there's anybody who wants to learn how to do it and get into the industry, that would be a good place to do it.
Awesome, man. Dude, Urban, this has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today. You are just a wealth of knowledge and an inspiration to us all. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an honor, and maybe we can do it again in the future.
For sure, man.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to today's amazing episode with Urban. I really enjoyed talking with him. I just wanted to remind you all that his Rebelway course has a couple more days as of today, May 4th, when the episode came out, for you to sign up and participate in furthering your VFX education. And even if you can't make this course, these online learning platforms like VFX Apprentice, like Rebelway, are great places for you to learn from artists that are working in studios on production-ready projects where you're really, really learning from the best of the best. And I encourage you to sign up for a course and just pick up some newfound knowledge. Speaking of amazing courses, one of the initiatives of the podcast that we're looking at doing is getting kind of like a teacher-student episode series going. So I want to encourage you to go join on the forums for the Real-Time Visual Effects podcast thread. If you're interested in learning about a topic or teaching a topic on the podcast to a select group of students, feel free to pitch that topic idea and we can see if we can get some coverage on it. All right then, until next time, rock on.